All right, let me try that again. Hey, everybody. I pray that you guys are well. This is Dr. Charles Lee Johnson. Excited that you guys are continuing to go forward. We're all healthy and doing well. Been trying to check on you guys programmatically, but I'm excited that we are able to come together, at least in this medium, in order to stay connected. Our lecture for this week is going to be on community organizing, community development. I know that many of you guys have been confused on which week is it. Is it week 11, 12, or 13? Consider this lecture to be a coverage for week 12 and 13, all right? We're going to cover information from both of those. Then you have supportive videos that are included inside of your Blackboard in order to help you follow along with the content. So that's a little bit of the way of how we're going to function. I'm excited for what we're going to share today. It's going to be a little bit of a longer lecture. So I want you to tune in, following the slides with me. I'm going to share my screen with you at this time so that we can all see where we're going. And I think that you guys will enjoy the lecture, and hopefully it'll be supportive and encouraging to you as some of those tools you need in order to be an effective social worker. All right. And so once again, like I said, this is going to be weeks 12 and 13's lectures. And let me back us up and start us from the beginning here. So human behavior in the social environment, week 12 and 13, community development and community organization. So one of the things that we know is very important is that as a social worker, you need a lot of tools. And a lot of times we stress the micro side of social work practice, very important in order to work with individuals. But on the macro side, how do we tackle those larger issues that are going on in our community? Sometimes it seems like so much is going on, it's just too much in order to take it on. But that's where we have our training in community organizing and community development, which really allows us to make massive change in a small amount of time sometimes, okay, if we do it effectively. And so we're going to walk through those steps of how do we do that as social workers. So first off, what have we been doing in class? We've been trying to tell everybody to wake up, okay? People's History of the United States was screaming, wake up, to understand what's really going on, how other people feel. When we read Pedagogy of the Oppressed, it was wake up. You cannot come in and be the savior and change people's lives. You got to engage others. When we read Evicted, it was wake up. There are people out here, the majority of Americans, who are living paycheck to paycheck. And if nothing else, this COVID-19 virus has shown us that people who are right on the edge, and if one thing falls off, their entire world could come crumbling down, right? So we're seeing that. We read The New Jim Crow, another book, Wake Up. Masses of people are being incarcerated. It's decimating communities, particular communities of those that are Black and Latino are adversely affected. We have to wake up and realize that we got to tackle these large issues. The problem with it is that we often feel most comfortable becoming a therapist or doing micro social work because in our minds, we're saying this is just too much to take on. There's no way I can tackle all of this. And what I want to do is to give you some of the tools of how we can do that. But first, we got to understand the social problems and the issues that we have out there. So we have a whole lot that's going on in our world. We look right now, we've got the COVID-19 pandemic, right? We've got how do we find relief services? How do we organize people to understand what's going on and what to do and how to take care of themselves? How do we move people into seeing which hospital they should go to? Or how do they get coverings for their faces? Or how do they access resources? Or what do they do if their landlord does come to them and say, you're going to be evicted, you have to get kicked out? Because although this pandemic is making it to where you lost your job, you are already 1 month or 2 months behind on rent. How do we help people like this? We got to understand how to do that. We look at the fact that we're #1 in mass incarceration. This is very sad, man. This is not where we want to be. A massive issue, but how do we mobilize in order to have an alternative to incarcerating people? I mean, what if we did something like making all drugs legal? What if we did something like you only go to jail for violent offenses, but we had the alternatives that were in place? Man, there's some great things that we can come up with if we organize and we develop our communities around it. What about homelessness? We have so many people who are without homes, people who are without care, people who are sleeping in cars or sleeping with other families. So how do we address homelessness? How do we get to that? How do we stop gentrification? You guys look at this building that's here. Sometimes you've got one building that looks like this, then you've got another building that changes, and people say, well, the way to change it is to make your building look like the one that's on the right side of your screen. Well, Beautiful as it is, the problem with that is that as you do that, how do people afford to stay in their community? What we find in gentrification, and you guys are going to see in some of the movies you're going to watch, is that we raise the value of things so high, people who've lived there for all their lives now can no longer afford to stay there. That's not a real good solution to what's going on. How about with human trafficking? A global issue that we have in human trafficking. How do we take it on? How do we grasp not just those who are being sex trafficked, but those who are being job trafficked? There's a lot of things that are going on. And then certainly when it comes to dealing with immigration and dealing with status, I love this sign, no human being is illegal. That is true. No human being should be illegal. So why do we call people illegal? Why do we call people aliens? Why do we do these kinds of things when we should be operating in a different way? All right. So that brings us into community development and community organizing. What is this thing? So I want you to look at what's in front of you. You find that there are essentially these 5 components of community organizing and development. Now, to be fair, organizing and development are different things. Organizing in a lot of ways is mobilizing and pulling people together in order to collaborate around social issues. I want you to know this difference. Development might be in a way of maturing, educating, supporting, encouraging, rallying, empowering people in order to radically change what's going on. So on one end, we're pulling people together to notice that there is an issue. On the other end, community development end, we're actually empowering people in order to take action in order to change their situation, right? So there are some nuances. As part of community development, there's always community organizing, okay? But community organizing doesn't always lead to development. I hope you can understand that. So look at these 5 things. We find that there's got to be relationship building, right? There's got to be education. We build the capacity of community members in order to get invested in what's happening. You saw that in Pedagogy of the Oppressed. We start developing natural leaders that come out of that group in order to take action. We move them into community action. That equates to the people understanding I've got the power, all right? And it creates equity. You guys follow that? So you want to follow that clock all the way around. Relationship building, that's the organizing part of it, right? The education, that's some organizing parts of it as well. But then when we start getting into development, we get into capacity building of community members, being able to enlarge their ability to engage, finding natural leaders in that group. We don't want to be the ones that lead. We want to find others who are able to lead, and then leading them into community action. This translates eventually into the people having power. When they have power, it creates equity around their situation. You follow that? That's a good one there. So what is a community? When we talk about community awareness and community development, what exactly is a community? So our community is the city or town. It's the geographic space that we live in. Our communities can also be defined by our culture, our language, or beliefs that we share. Certainly Christianity can be a community. The fact that I'm an African American, that can be a community. You belong to CBU, that can be a community, all right? Another instance of a community is that the idea that we speak a shared language. So those who speak English, of course, share a common community. People may speak Spanish, and although they live in different geographic spaces, they share the community of that language, right? So I want you to see that community can be a lot greater than what we often look at community as, right? It's not just where you live, okay? But it can also be culturally where you share beliefs that you share, language that are shared, interests that are shared, right? And the idea is that most of us belong to more than one community, whether we're aware of it or not. We did an exercise like this earlier in the year where I had you guys put together the dominant groups that you belong to and different communities that, that you're a part of. This is a part of their primary groups and secondary groups, knowing your community. Look at the word development. The term development often carries an assumption of growth and expansion. So remember I shared that earlier, but development doesn't always mean growth, okay? But it does imply change. It always means change. So it doesn't mean that necessarily everything's gonna get bigger or you're gonna have more of it, but it does say that something has changed from one state to the next, right? So we put it together Community development then is a process where community members come together to take collective action and generate solutions to common problems, right? Community well-being often evolves from this type of collective action that takes place at a grassroots level. We want to be able to engage folks to say, hey, this is a problem. We don't like trafficking in our community. We don't like how folks who have immigrated here are being treated. So we pull them together in order to organize and how to respond. Okay, through community development, the community becomes, look at all these traits, more responsible. They organize and plan together. They develop what's best for them by empowering themselves, very important, okay? Through community development, we can reduce poverty and suffering. We create employment and economic opportunities. We can achieve social, economic, cultural, and environmental goals, the things that we want to accomplish. We can move them through. So this is a great tool for social workers to know how we organize and how we move people into development. It's critical in our practice, right? So effective community development is not short-term. So much of what we do as social workers is very crisis-oriented. Community development can be a long-term endeavor. So this is the one part of our profession that we can be engaged in for an extended amount of time. It's always well-planned. It is not something where we do it for the community. This is something we do with the community. It's inclusive and it's equitable, right? It's holistic and it's integrated into the bigger picture. It is always looking for how the most people can benefit, and it's initiated and supported by community members, all right? For the community, by the community. It's grounded in experience that leads to best practices. So remember, in many of your macro outline projects, I asked a lot of things like, you know, how is this connected to best practices? Because community development, when you're doing macro social work, it must be informed, it must be data driven, okay? So you can't just come up with stuff on a whim. You wanna look at what the research says, and you wanna implement best practice strategies in order to ensure success. Why? Because people are gonna be pretty disappointed if you waste their time doing some stuff that doesn't work. You want to show people where this has worked before, okay? And that encourages people to get involved because they see maybe what is done another place that maybe can do the same in their community, right? There's importance to have a precedent. When you go to the courtroom, law is built on precedents, right? Community development is no different. You gotta have a precedent. So what do we have? We have shared language, we have a shared purpose, and we have collective impact. Can you say that with me? Shared language, shared purpose, collective impact. Once again, shared language, shared purpose, collective impact. What we have is that we want to bring everybody together and to see that we're all on the same page and we all have issues that affect all of us. One of the things that you've seen with this COVID-19 virus is that this is not something that separates us by race or Republican or Democrat or this or that. We've had a Congress that couldn't get along to pass any legislation for the last couple of years. And now, in the response to COVID-19, we got a $2 trillion piece of legislation passed in a few days. Why? Shared language, shared purpose, collective impact. So sometimes our goal as social workers is to get everybody to see where we are all affected by the issues that are going on. What often happens is that people who come from privilege say, well, that's not my issue, that's somebody else's issue. And then other people who are going through the issue feel, well, nobody cares. We have to get everyone to see how this affects everybody and how everybody can benefit from us addressing this issue. That's one of the first jobs for a social worker in community development. Right? So let's look at a common framework for community development. Our purpose then is to help create the conditions for a just, inclusive, and sustainable society by supporting communities to engage in collective action for transformative change. What do we want to do? We want to pull people together to create equity, equality. And how does that come? By everyone working together to do something that would benefit the majority of folks who live in that community. That's the purpose of which we work. right? Let's get the values and processes. The core values for community development are concerned with greater social justice. This is right up social workers' alleys, right? For a society where human rights are promoted and all forms of oppression, discrimination, marginalization, and exclusion are addressed, right? So we're looking for holistic change, not something that deals with one part of the issue and leaves the rest alone. We want to deal with it all, right? Look at these core values that are in the framework for community development. Collective learning, so some way in which everybody is learning about the issue and learning about the solutions. Empowerment, so empowering everyone to feel that you are part of the change. Meaningful participation, okay? So I don't want to do things that don't mean anything, right? But I'm doing things that actually are going to move us forward. Collective action and collective outcomes, and equality. These are the core values and processes that drive what we do in community development, right? So I want you to think about this. As a social worker, when you're working and you're addressing larger systemic issues, what's your job? You identify what that target population is. You start building collective learning, right? Maybe that's through public forums. Maybe that's through community meetings. Maybe that's through commercials and PSAs. Maybe that's through flyers. Maybe that's through community education seminars. But you start building this collective learning, this awareness, this consciousness raising. You guys have seen that in some of your theories, right? Remember pedagogy. This consciousness raising, and you start shifting people into seeing that they are empowered. You start getting them to participate in things that are meaningful, that are going to help create that change, collective action and outcomes, and that brings us to equality. How do we do it? Bring people together, build and owning evidence and a future vision, right? So they are seeing how this is actually working, this is actually going to change, and now we have a shared vision. That is one of the traits of all good leaders. You have to build a shared vision. We develop confidence and skills and understanding into the nuances of the social problem. Wasn't it interesting when you read Evicted that you got to see that not only is there an issue with housing, but there are a lot of issues behind the housing issue that we don't think about. Like wage inequality is part of unequal housing, or how addiction is tied to housing, right? Or how policy and eviction court is related to homelessness. So if you address one side of the issue, but you don't address the other sides, the issues with the court, the issues in employment, then you can't really take on homelessness or eviction, right? So one of the things that we do in community development is that you have to get people to see the full picture. Many people have a small understanding of what's going on, and you want them to be able to see the whole thing. That's that building of understanding. We want to mobilize and organize people to network and strengthen their visibility and their understanding of what's going on in the community. This is a very critical piece, that relationship building, that connecting of others, the pointing people in the right direction, helping people to see which organizations they should go to for what. Some of you guys in your macro project proposals, you put together resource manuals. And in your mind, you're probably like, hey, this is probably not a big thing. But the reality is that that's a huge thing when you're doing community development, because a lot of times people suffer because they don't know where to go. The Bible says, my people suffer for a lack of knowledge, right? They just don't know who's doing what or where to go. When we put things together that show people, okay, this is where you can go for this, for this, for this, for this, it allows them to feel empowered, okay, to know what to do to take charge of their own lives. Last but not least, we want them to be able to take action, right? To take action on what it is they're doing. Notice these methods here, you guys. 5 methods. We bring people together, right? We help to build and own evidence, okay? And build a shared vision of what it could be like in the future. What could it be like if we did not have a jail culture? What could it be like if someone committed a minor infraction, but they stayed in their community in order to get help and to rehabilitate? What could rehabilitation look like not behind bars, right? What if we eliminated jails, right? What could we have instead, right? There are some different ideas for how we can do things. We have to be able to project and share that vision so other people can come into it. Are you guys following what I'm saying? This is very powerful stuff. And so we then move them into developing confidence, skills, and understanding. So we start teaching. This is a big part of CBT, isn't it? Cognitive behavioral therapy is that you start teaching skills, right? How do you protest? How do you start a survey? How do you start a petition, right? How do you have a rally? We start building these things so people know how to do it. How do you file an injunction? How do you file a complaint? We start showing people how to do these things that creates mass change. How do you create a commercial, right? How do you get the word out? How do you use social media in order to bring attention to your issue? That's all that part of developing confidence, skills, and understanding. And you can be as creative as you want in this area, but this is where we're actually training people of how to take action in their lives. Then we mobilize them, we organize them, we connect people with each other, we move them into action. What are the outcomes? Firstly, simple and clear evidence of the collective ambition of that community. We show everybody this is what came out of what you did. This is very important. If you can't show people the evidence of progress, it's gonna drop off, okay? So you have to build into your framework of development of being able to point out to people success, however it is, evidence of success, very important. That could look in many different ways. Success could be, hey, this is now on TV. This is now on the radio. You know what? 1,000 people liked what we did in our action today, right? That's clear evidence that the community coming together, people are taking notice. And that encourages more people to get involved. This is very, very important, you guys. This is why I say to people all the time, if you didn't put a press kit together, if you didn't invite local media, maybe even national media to your event, it may not have even happened. Nobody's going to know. Community development knows how to attract cameras, attract reporters, attract and use social media. In this day and age, we have our own media, man. We got our phones, man. These phones are powerful, and it's a way to get the word out always. Never allow community development to happen and you didn't capture a picture, you didn't capture a video, you didn't capture any way of sharing it on social media. That's bad development. In this day and age, there's too many ways to get other people engaged and involved. It's got to happen. Secondly, that collective ambition is the outcome around which actions can be proposed and planned. Okay, so everybody being excited about it is where we can plan future actions. Okay, and then finally, it provides an expression of the values and priorities of that community. That's an outcome, is that the community has a voice. Can't even manage to say how important that is. Super important that community knows that they have a voice. What are the outcomes in policy and structural at the structural and governance level? Community networks are formed where strengthened alliances reflect collective common interests. Listen, governments pay attention when people get organized. They do. That's the bottom line. They pay attention when they start seeing people come together. When people start holding hands and marching together and folks who normally don't talk to each other is talking to each other, all of a sudden politicians start looking up, just like we look up when they start working together, okay? There's powers and alliances, all right? Community issues appear on the agenda of decision makers. All of a sudden, when people are working together, politicians pay attention, and now all of a sudden, it's on their agenda, okay? Communities influence and decision making at local, national, international level. You guys remember the Black Lives Matter movement? All of a sudden, in presidential elections, their name was being mentioned. BLM, they're at protests, on the debate circles. Wow. Okay. They put themselves front and center of saying so many young Black men are being killed by law enforcement officers, right? That we've got to make this a big issue. Now, where did it fall short on the community development side? It fell short because it only addressed part of the issue. Now, this is going to be a little bit of criticism, and I know I could take some flack for this, but it fell short on one of its sides of organizing because it only dealt with part of the problem. Yes, young Black men are being killed disproportionately by law enforcement and harassed. But young Black men are disproportionately also being killed and murdered by other young Black men. So you can't address blue on Black violence without also addressing Black on Black violence. Maybe they are rooted in the same systemic things, okay? There's an argument for that, and I can hear that. But the reality is that when you start developing and you're not dealing with the full spectrum of the issue, then eventually your argument becomes weak, the development falls off, and soon nobody's mentioning you anymore, as what happened with Black Lives Matter, right? It disappears from the radar of a lot of decision makers who are out there. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, not just this reason, but one of those reasons is exactly what I said, and that is you have to deal with the fullness of the issues of what people are dealing with, okay? It's one thing when I say, hey, this young man got killed by a police officer, and that is tragic, okay? But now let's add it up to the 90 African-American men who were shot over the weekend, but they were all shot by other young Black men, right? Then it says, okay, well, why is one more important than the other? Do we not care about, what's going on? Are we just picking on one group? No, we should care about someone dying or someone being shot, period. So we have to address the full thing. I hope that's making sense to you guys. Communities are supported to design and control their own solutions, right? So we're no longer in the hands of politicians. Politicians are in our hands. That's what democracy is supposed to be about. We're the ones, okay, who guide what the politicians should be working on, not the other way around. We've lost sight of democracy. We're actually living in an aristocracy, in an egalitarian or a elitist system, right, where there is no equality. We got to switch that. So the changes ought to benefit the marginalized community, and that should be evident in policy and legislation, okay? I love these outcomes for community development and policy and structural governance. You can't community develop without dealing with government. Has to be engaged, has to be involved. Very important. So outcomes and common mindsets, ideology thinking, which informs policy. So decision makers, public institutions, staff, should have a well-informed understanding and approach to marginalized and minority groups. Very important. Who helps them to get there? Raise your hand. You, social worker. Transparency should be evident in the way decisions are made. Services and structures respond effectively to the needs of communities. And participatory spaces reflect genuine sharing of power with marginalized and minority groups. This means that everybody is allowed to be there. Okay, people from the community are sitting on the correct boards and decision-making bodies. Very important. Okay, so let's look at this process. What does this remind you a little bit of? Okay, I hear you. It reminds you of the GIM, right? And so built into community development, very similar, is our general intervention model, right? Which normally would start with engagement, but here commitment, that's engagement, assessment, right? Planning, implementation, and evaluation. And we start the circle all over again. So you already have this kind of built into your fabric, your DNA as a social worker, all right? That engagement, but just for a simplified paradigm for community development, you have these 5 steps: commitment, assessment, planning, implementation, and evaluation. All right? What are some things I need to understand in community development? I got to understand community needs, priorities, and values. And who gives that to me? The community, not you. Be careful of listening to other people who aren't from that community tell you what that community needs. That's not the right way for it to be done. So what do you want to do? You want to find out, what does the community need? What does the community want? What are the community priorities? And I'm going to tell you how you get that information in just a second. But it's the first part of what you have to have when you're going to do community development. Social and economic development and natural resource management, right? I got to know what's there, right? What's there? And how can I utilize the strengths of what's there in order to help this community be better? That's the second part, okay, of community development. I gotta have that. That's very important. I'm gonna show you how to do that. In social work, we call that community asset mapping, your CAM. I want you guys to all have that. Community asset mapping, okay? The social and economic development and natural resource management. I gotta know everything that's there. We wanna partner partnership brokering and maintenance. We want to help people come together, start connecting people, and maintain those relationships. Group processes and dynamics. We're learning about that. Project management, financial management, team building and team management, problem solving and decision making, training and skills development, and organizational development and design. Kind of what we talked about last week, right? But I want you to have an understanding of all these things. You see this? In order to be effective at community development. All right, let me pause for a second because I know what some of you guys are thinking. Well, I just want to be a social worker. I want to help individuals. And I want to stop again and tell you, you're going to help a lot of individuals along the way. But here, Dr. LJ, when I'm telling this to you, you have to also be a community developer. We're going to suffer, you guys, in our nation and our world, unless as social workers, we live up to the fullness of what we are called to do. We are called to be world changers. That's who you are. You are called to change the world. That's what God has gifted you to do. That's why you are in this program. And so development has to be in your toolbox when you're working for a child welfare agency, right? You want to be able to look at what are the needs of kids who are in foster care? What are their priorities? What are their values, right? A lot of times we provide services because it's always been done a certain way. But good social workers can step back and say, you know what? What are the foster kids saying? What are the foster families saying? What do they want? And how do they best receive services? One of the beauties that I think that this crisis of COVID-19 has brought to us is telehealth and telesocial work, right? That we can communicate to our clients and to our foster families via phone, video conference, Zoom, whatever, groups. Well, what does that do? That helps the single mom who may have 2 or 3 kids and daycare and work. And how is she supposed to do the parenting classes? And how is she supposed to do these other groups? And how is she supposed to build these skills? And then when is she supposed to meet with you? Well, if she could do it via her phone and we can check in with her and she could be a part of a group through Zoom or whatever, man, what a blessing that would be. We might actually start to see communities form online where people are able to move forward. This is the type of stuff that I'm saying as social workers and you guys as new social workers, this is the type of stuff you guys are going to be able to breathe into a dying system in order to give us life. And that's going to be community development. All right, let me get off my soapbox and get back to our lecture, you guys. So you want to have a demonstrated capacity. When you're a community developer, you want to have a demonstrated capacity in planning and program design. So many of you guys on that macro side, you're going to learn this next year, how to design a program, how to plan out a program, how to do research and assessment, analysis and evaluation. You're going to take a whole class just on program evaluation. This is very key and important. How do we assess if something is working? And why are we doing something if we know it doesn't work, right? How to build teams and how to do staff development and financial management. Very important. I've told many of you, you're going to be supervisors within 3 to 5 years of you graduating from this program. You're going to need to know how to run a budget, how to make a balanced budget, how to identify a profit and loss statement, right? How to ensure that people are getting paid well as making sure that you have the resources for your agency. How do you get in-kind donations? How do you build a volunteer base? All of those things, very important. You're going to learn all those things in your second year. Communications, consultation and facilitation, problem solving and conflict resolution, organizational design and development. All of that you're going to learn in your second year. So we're going to give you all those skills. Don't worry about it. You are going to leave this program with those skills. But that's not what this class is going to do for you. What we're going to do for you is this first part of community development, which is how do you assess the needs of what people have out there, okay? We're gonna get there in just a second. I have respect for the local people and communities as a community developer, that they are the experts, not me, all right? That development is a social process, okay? No one person has a monopoly on or expertise in how things to be done, just the community, really. The value of the process and sustainability, I'm not looking for quick results, I'm not looking for a quick fix, right? This is gonna take some time. Local empowerment and development. knowledge and perspectives, facilitation, not leadership. Okay. So this is not me telling everybody what to do. I'm in charge. Look at me. But I, as a social worker, am facilitating and helping the process to move forward, right? Patience, flexibility, new ideas, approaches, and opportunities, constructive criticism, and self-evaluation. These are all things that you have to have a high tolerance for as a community developer. You're going to see this in your book, The Community Development Reader, and hopefully you guys are working through that book and having a good time with it. You're going to see all of these things are critical values that you must have in order to help communities develop. I hope that you guys are seeing that already. All right. So I know that people have always asked you, do you know your ABCs? I'm going to ask you today, do you know your ABCD? Do you know your ABCD? And ABCD, this sounds like a good quiz question, stands for Asset-Based Community Development. Asset-Based Community Development. Easy for you to remember, ABCD. So this is the model that I'm training you guys in. When it comes to community development and somebody asks you, well, what model of community development have you learned? You're gonna say ABCD, Asset-Based Community Development, which means that you work from a strengths perspective in community development. You're looking at what the community already has, what the community is already good at, and you build from that foundation. So look at this chart. The foundational truths of ABCD is number one, everyone has gifts. Everyone has something that they're good at, that they're talented at, that goes well. Every community. Your job as a community developer is to find that and build on that strength. If I want to work with millennials, right, I know that many of them are very computer savvy, right? So I want to build on that gift. I want to do things that market to that group using the mediums that work for them. Number two is that everyone has something to contribute. And I've got to make sure that that is foundational to me, is that I know that everyone can give something, right? No one is left out. Number three, everyone cares about something, and that passion is his or her motivation to act, right? So foundational truths of asset-based community development: everybody's got a gift, everyone has something to contribute, and everybody's got something that they care about. My job is to find what do they care about and then speak to that, because that's what's going to motivate them to take action. Wow. We've learned some good stuff here, you guys, already. This is good stuff. All right? So what do we do with ABCD? We discover strengths. We organize and map where are those strengths, where are those resources, where are those skills. We link and mobilize. We push the community to drive the initiatives. We help to sustain the process. So the ABCD methodology is right here, right? 5 steps, easy for you to follow. Discover the strengths of the community, organize and map where are the resources. That's that community organizing piece, right? Link and mobilize those resources, educate them, make them aware, get them excited about what's going on, right? Remember, they care about something, so motivate them in that passion, right? That's that mobilizing. Push the community to drive the initiatives, okay? Whatever those initiatives are gonna be, helps sustain the process. That's asset-based community development methodology. All right, so now you've got some tools in your hand. Last week we talked about organizations and how organizations work. Now you have how to link them, get them to work together, how to discover their strengths, organize and map them, link them, drive the initiative, sustain the process, asset-based community development methodology. Let's keep going. So how is this different than other ways of community development, okay? So when we look at typical international development, just community development on its own, and asset-based, look at the differences. On typical side, focuses on community deficiencies, okay? There's a lot of people dying in this community, right? On the asset-based side, no, we focus on community assets. There's a lot of love in this community, and I wanna build on that. Notice the difference. One is focused on death, right? So we gotta eliminate this death. That often doesn't make people feel good about themselves, okay? It makes you feel like you're blaming that group right? You might be met with a lot more resistance with taking that approach versus an asset approach, which says, you know what? There's a lot of love in this community, and this isn't a part of that love, not death, right? So, how do we increase more love, which a natural effect of that will be decreasing death, okay? Decreasing morbidity, right? On the typical side, we respond to the problem, okay? On the asset side, there's an opportunity, okay? I'm looking for that. On the typical side, clarity and favor orientation. The opposite side, investment and rights orientation, okay? And I want you can just look at this list. I'm not gonna go through the whole thing because I think that would be, taken away from you guys and the fact that you know how to read, okay? But look at some of these. People are the beneficiaries in typical, right, development. On the opposite side, the people are citizens and co-creators who are in control in asset base, right? They're included, right? The aim on the typical side is to fix people. The aim on the asset base side is to develop people, right? To be involved in their own community transformation. Very important. So I just want you guys to have something of where the ABCD method is so much different than normal community development, which is why I want to teach you guys ABCD, asset-based community development, okay, and not just traditional community development models, okay? So I want you to just look at the slide, take some time, sit with it, review it. When you can, pause your screen, pause this YouTube, and just kind of study this chart so that you can know exactly what it is that you're holding on to in asset-based development, okay? Very important here. Are you guys enjoying this lecture so far? I hope so. I hope that you're gathering from this of ways that you can affect larger issues. As a social worker, sure, have your private practice, but be engaged in tackling some of these larger social issues, okay? And mobilizing a community in order to attack these issues. I'm telling y'all, we can change the world if more of us as social workers got involved in community development. It's in our DNA. It's what we're supposed to be doing. All right. So look at my neighborhood, right? And I love this as a pictorial, so I wanted to include it. We have a voice, we take action, we share our stories, right? Everyone welcome. Look at the inclusiveness of this entire thing. I love that, right? You look in the top corner, find people with interests and skills or passion and bring them together. Make connections across the neighborhood. Connect people with shared interests. Connect to local assets. Support people to take action. And all of this stuff becomes a part of community development. It can be a beautiful thing. Sometimes we're thinking that this has to be a lot of people. It doesn't, okay? This can be a few people coming together. Last week, you guys put together some outstanding assignments. I've been blown away as I've read many of you guys' assignments on your organizations that you guys want to create. Well, some of those organizations are built around community development models. You just didn't have a name for it. Now you know that your organization does asset-based community development. And this is what it does. It pulls everybody together. Notice how neighbor is spelled in this diagram. Is neighborhood, right? It's our neighborhood. It's not belonging to any individual or any particular person, but that we're all in this together. And I think that that's radically important. It's our hood. Okay, so this is all good. Dr. Lee Johnson, how do we do this? Okay, I told you what I'm going to do is give you the first step in how you move into being an excellent community developer as a social worker. Many of the skills you're going to need to learn you're going to learn in your second year, but you're going to learn from me today how to do the first part after you do the engagement and commitment. How do you get into this assessment? How do you do successful needs assessments? Okay, now, to be clear, I'm going to give you qualitative methods. There's qualitative and quantitative methods. I'm going to give you qualitative methods to assess community issues and community needs. You guys ready? Because now we're going to learn some skills of exactly what you have. Okay? Qualitative methods of assessment are those whose results can't be expressed in numbers. Okay? That will be quantitative. Just want you to know the difference here. Okay? In order to have good qualitative results and to make sure that they're as reliable as possible, we want to report accurately and completely. We want to frame the right questions and direct them appropriately so that we get exactly what it is that we need. We want to use qualitative methods specifically to obtain information that you couldn't get if you use quantitative methods. Okay, and we're going to talk about this in a second. You're going to use the method that can best help you answer the questions you're asking. This is very important. Not every method is going to be good for what it is you want. Some of the methods are going to be very good for short-term, very quick responses, and others are going to be needed if you need a more elongated response. And you want to make sure you sort out your feelings. You don't want that counter-transference, damaging what you're putting out to people. So you want to make sure you check your own feelings, okay, to make sure that your findings are truly objective. Very important in the work that we're doing, okay? So why use qualitative methods of assessment? They can answer questions that quantitative measures can't, right? I can tell you things that numbers can't tell you. When I do a survey, I can get back results that tell me exactly how people feel. A number can't necessarily tell me that. It might tell me that 90% of the people disagree with this, but it doesn't tell me that this has caused them damage in their lives, right? But a qualitative assessment could tell me that. It could tell me what's behind this 90% rating, right? So I call it qualitative assessment is very important. I tend to lean as a social worker towards qualitative assessments and methodologies in research more than quantitative. I really am about the feelings and the expressions and hearing from the community. I feel like that's more expressive. I didn't share this in this PowerPoint. I am going to share it, and I did share it on a video on community-based participatory research. One of the things with CBPR is that you want to be able to hear from people. And a lot of those methods are through qualitative methods, okay, that you can't get with numbers. They connect directly with the population and community you're connected with. They can get at the underlying realities of the situation. They involve the population of interest. So they're involved in the research. It's their responses from them, not you counting and seeing how many people are in this deficit. So once again, with this asset-based community development, I'm now asking and getting the community involved in just putting the data together. So they're involved from the very beginning, very important. They often allow for a broader examination of the situation or community, okay? And it involves the human factor, not just the digit, okay? One of the other reasons why I love qualitative methods and very important for us in needs assessments. So when do we use qualitative methods of assessment? We use it when we want to understand the reasons and motivations for people's behavior, okay? Or why they do certain things in particular situations, okay? When we're analyzing quantitative data sets, okay? I'm trying to understand how we got to these numbers, okay? So a lot of times you'll find that, okay, we got these numbers out there. Well, why? You can use those data sets, that quantitative data, in order to drive your survey or your focus group that's pulling qualitative data in order to move forward. I just helped many of you guys for next year for your research project, okay? That those tie together. When you're trying to develop suggestions and recommendations, qualitative assessments are best, okay? When you would want to involve the community as directly as possible, and when you're doing community-based participatory research, okay? Because you want the community to be involved in the planning and in the implementing of the research of what's going on. Qualitative assessment methods, that's your thing, okay? So how do you use qualitative methods of assessment? You ask yourself, what is it that I need to know? I got to choose the method that's best to get this information, okay? Who are the best people to get this information? And if I need to, I might need to train them Okay, I don't want you to ask the question this way. I want you to ask question this way. I want you to be patient and not drive them to give you answers. I want you to, wait for them to say what they want to say, right? So there may be a little bit of training there. Determine from whom and from where you are going to gather the information, and then gather the information. Okay. So look at this needs assessment, this assessment framework. Imagine that you're working with a client even. Okay, this is how important needs assessments are. You want to make sure that you're assessing all of these things, right? Right. I'm working with Shaniqua, and Shaniqua is in the child welfare system, and she is 17 years old, and she's going to emancipate and be out of the system. Well, I want to do a full assessment on Shaniqua. And if I'm doing an assessment on Shaniqua, guess what? I need to assess everything that Shaniqua is connected to, right? And I want to involve Shaniqua in the assessment. So I might do a qualitative assessment that includes Shaniqua, not just me sitting back and making my own conclusions, which is what a lot of people do, okay, about Shaniqua. But I want to ask her about her basic care, her safety. Does she feel warm? About her stimulation, about her boundaries, about stability. I want to ask her about her family history, her housing, employment, and income. I want to ask those around her family, and others who are engaged to her. I want to assess everything around her and get everybody involved, the community, everything involved, to come up with a true assessment. Because as a developer, just around Shaniqua, I might be able to broker some connections. I might be able to mobilize the community around her, so that when she emancipates, it's not just all on her, but now there's a whole community that's rallying behind her and those like her in her position. You see where that's a different type of step? That's why every social worker, even if you're working at a child welfare agency, you should still have an asset-based community development model that's a framework for how you're working. Okay, I hope that made sense to you. Okay, so what's the difference between needs and resources? This sounds like a great question for a quiz too. Needs are the gaps between what a situation is and what it should be. Okay, the gap between those two, that's a need between what a situation is and what it should be. Resources, on the other end, are those things that can be used to improve the quality of community life. I love that. What's our job? Is to identify what are the needs and to find resources that can address those needs to close the gap, bringing us into equality. I love that, right? I hope you like that too, right? So why do we need to identify local needs and resources? So we can understand the environment, so we can understand public opinion, and we can make decisions about what's a priority. Very important, okay? You can see that those, who's gonna help us identify, or who benefits from us identifying the needs and resources? Those who are going through the problem, service providers, community leaders, and of course us. Very basic, you guys. Okay, and when do you wanna do this? When you're planning to start a program, when you're about to start a new initiative, and when your efforts are being reviewed, okay? We're starting to see, does this work, does this not work? That's when we wanna look at needs and resources. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple of different ways of how you use qualitative methods in your needs assessments, okay? And I'm going to run through them, but you can pause these slides. I'm going to move through them quickly, but you can pause at any point so you can kind of deal with the slide longer, okay? This might be good slides for us to discuss when we come together in our groups, our synchronous groups online, to discuss how you can use these different things. I'm gonna breeze through them. So essentially what I'm gonna give you is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, okay, 8 different methods. So now you've got 8 more tools. Last week I told you about 13 with task groups and treatment groups. I'm now giving you 8 more tools that you have in your bag as a social worker of how to be a community developer, how to spawn that side of you for the assessment, okay? Let's walk into it. We have individual and group interviews. We have observation. We have community asset mapping. That's the last one I'm gonna do. We have surveys. We have focus groups, community meetings, public forums, and then how do we interpret that data and give it back to the community, right? Very important. Okay, what's the first one we're gonna deal with is observation. Inside of the pocketbook of every social worker is observation. We are trained very early on to do biopsychosocial, and when we do biopsychosocial, what are we often doing? Observing. We step back and we look and we listen, and then we write up an assessment based upon what we've seen. Now, what's the difference if you're an ABCD observationist or social worker? If this is your method of assessment, what I'm asking you to do is to also find out from your client, what did they observe about you? What did they observe about their environment? What did they observe about their situation? So you want to get their voice in your observation and make sure that's reflected in any report that you put out. Okay, are you getting that? For an observation, okay, think carefully about what it is you're looking for, okay, when you go into an observation. So when I'm going out to check on my caseload, my client load, my clients, before I go there, have I taken some time to think about what I'm looking for today, what I want to see today, what type of responses, what type of questions I want to ask, what type of things am I going to be looking for? That's very important, because then I'm more directed in an assessment versus the assessment being more really based upon how I feel that day, and maybe not about what my client is going through. Some stuff I might have just waved off if I was having a good day. But if I'm having a bad day, then I might have impacted that observation. Are you guys following me? So as a social worker, I want to ask myself, what questions do I want to answer as I go through this observation? All right. How long do I want this observation to take place? Who am I observing? Am I observing the client, the immediate client, or do I want to observe the system and how the system is responding to my client? Okay. How their job is responding to them, right? Do I want to observe how their landlord is treating them? Do I want to observe their addiction or their health issues? So see, I have different things I can look at and I can focus on that. So the observation says, sometimes I'm looking for my client to fail when I really need to be looking at all these other things, which is why I want to ask those questions, right? Determine what you want to do and then include those observations in your report. I hope you guys can see how that's very important. That's good assessment methods, observation and writing it up, but I'm including those in what I'm doing, all right? What about if I am not doing an observation? What about a survey? Okay, this is another tool used by us as social workers. Well, a survey should have a preset list of questions to be answered, okay? I should have a predetermined sample, okay? What's the number of people that I wanna have for this and who is that group? I wanna determine, am I gonna do this interview by phone? Is it gonna be written? Is it gonna be mailed? Is it gonna be a Survey Monkey? Is it gonna be a Google Doc? What is it going to be, right? What's my form that's gonna give me the most return, okay? And it's gonna include a wider range of folks to respond in the survey. For instance, if I only put out the survey through Survey Monkey, then I'm only going to get responses from people who at least have a computer and have access to the internet. But what if all the constituents don't have that? Did I just miss their voice? And did you just skew your data to only those people who are privileged enough to have the mediums that you provided for them to be able to let their voice be heard? So you want to think about all of that when you're putting together a survey. You want to be very careful to ask pointed questions that are going to give you really what you want. Okay, so I can ask a question, how are you doing today? Good, bad, or I don't know, right? Okay, well, that's a question, but what you really gonna do with that? Okay, versus asking a question like, I feel supported by my social worker today. True, false, or not at all, right? Okay, something like that. All right. So then now I get an answer that I can actually do something with. Sometimes we have surveys and it's like, what are you going to do with that? We got to really think about our questions so that it's giving us stuff that we can do something with. At the end, we tabulate it, we summarize it, we distribute it, we discuss it, and we use it. Okay, look at that. We summarize it, we give the results back to the community. Hey, this is what we found. This is what you said. Now let's discuss it, because they might say, no, that's not what I was saying at all. Your question was asked the wrong way. Or when you asked this question, this is what it made me think. Oh man, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Okay, so now let's go back, because now the qualitative data can give me something different, right? Then I can use the results of what they give me, right? Why do I want to do an assessment survey? To learn more about my group or community. If I want to find out information about them, to get a more honest and objective description, to become aware of needs that you never knew about, to be able to document those needs, to make sure your future actions are in line with community needs. If you want to garner greater support, if you want to involve more people in subsequent action, then you can use an assessment survey. Surveys are good tools when you're at this place. Notice that these are the conditions in which a survey is best used. Okay? I want to use a survey when there's no doubt as to what needs to be done. Okay? When it is urgent to act now. Okay? Or this is when you should not use a survey. Okay? When you already know what should be done, don't use a survey, right? Because now it's almost like you're insulting the people. If you need to take action right now, a survey is going to take you forever. Don't use a survey, right? You're wasting time to send it out, get it back, get the results, tabulate it, share it, get everybody's opinion, then review it again, then put out the data. Nah, it's not, okay? That's not going to do it, okay? You're wasting people's time. That's not the time to do a survey, okay? When an assessment has been done recently, don't do a survey. And when the community will see it as redundant or wasteful, you don't want to do a survey, okay? So how do we do it? We identify the reasons for choosing the survey. We decide how much time we have to do the survey, how many people we're going to question, who's going to be asked, what questions are going to be asked, and who's going to ask the questions. These are all 7 things I got to ask. Now watch these 8 through 16. I want to create a draft of the survey, try out the survey on a test group, see how it works with them, revise the survey based upon your test group who says, you know what, that question kind of led me wrong. I thought you were saying this instead of this. So get your questions right using language that is used by the community you're going to survey, okay? So sometimes that language is a big deal. Revise it, make it appropriate for the community, administer it, tabulate your results, interpret those results, which means what does this mean? Sometimes you get the survey together. Once you get the results, you might have a focus group. I'm going to talk about that next. And your focus group is to help you understand what the survey said. Okay? Plan your future actions, implement your actions, and then repeat the assessment, right? Okay? So remember, all of this you want to be able to act on as a community developer. You want to be able to move people to take action because this is how the community feels. This is what we need to do. Okay? This was just a survey and social work practice. I'm going to leave this to you guys to look at it. I think I've already beat this horse enough. This was a survey to ask people, how do you spend, social workers, how do you spend the typical social work week? You can look at the data they gave back. What do we have here? We have some good quantitative data, but we don't have a lot of qualitative data. How would you use a survey in order to pull qualitative data when looking at this? I just want you to pause here and ask yourself, what kind of survey would you ask in order to get more what questions would be on your survey in order to get more qualitative data in something like this, right? Individual or group interviews, okay? So let's say that there's not enough time to do a sample, to do a survey, so I wanna do individual or group interviews, okay? There's a way to do that. How do we do it? I'm gonna give you some interview tips of how you do this. Number 1, start with small talk. If you hop right into business, you've already lost them. Okay, start with small talk. Hey, how's it going? You know, why are you guys here? What are some things you're hoping will come out of today in order to get the interview going? Get people into the forum of talking and to feeling safe. Very important, Okay. Number two, explain your motives. Okay. What you're going to do with what they share. Will it be confidential? Will it be shared? Okay. What's going to go on there? Ask for a definition of the community. Follow up on leads and go to subjects. Ask who else you should talk to. Sometimes you're talking to somebody and they say, you know what? I'm glad you're talking to me, but my grandmother actually could give you more insight into what's going on with Johnny. Okay, thank you so much, right? Now I need to go talk to that person, right? Let the interviewee do the interview, okay, or end the interview. Don't cut it off and then thank the interviewee for his or her time, right? Let the interviewee choose the space. So you want to choose spaces that are most comfortable for the interviewee, not for you. When you tell people, hey, come to you or come into your office, well, I may not trust everybody in your office. Okay, so if you interview me there, that might not be a safe space. On the flip, sometimes we go to people's houses and then we're interviewing them about if their kid is safe in their house. But when you're interviewing me, I've got all these people around me who know I'm talking to you. That may not be safe for me. So ask me where I feel comfortable. I might say, I feel most comfortable if we meet at a McDonald's. Okay, because then I'm just meeting you and no one knows what I'm going through. Okay, so you want to meet in spaces for interviews that work for that person. Dress for the comfort of the interviewee, get permission beforehand to record them or to tape them or to photograph them. Record carefully the time and the place, circumstances, the details. Why? Because all of that could be playing into the answers you're getting, right? I interviewed this client at home and their spouse was in the other room. They may have felt intimidated giving me the responses with their spouse being in the other room. I noticed they stopped talking every time that person came out of the room. You see why this is very important? Okay. A lot of times we write up reports, we send it to a judge, and we haven't correctly captured the moment. We have to be truthful and be detailed in what we're doing. Okay. That's very important. Think out and frame your questions carefully. So you should think beforehand. Don't ask questions on the fly when you get there. Have your questions already prepared before you interview all the time. Now you can add more on the fly, but you should already have some questions together. You should have already thought about what you want to walk away with. Okay. Ask open-ended questions. Don't be scared to probe. Dig in there. Sometimes we're anxious to talk or to say something, so don't cut people off too quickly. Let them finish their sentences. A lot of times people will give you more if you just give them the pregnant pause, right? So you say, you know, tell me about how the kids have been doing since I last came. And then they start talking, but then they stop talking. And then you just shake your head and okay, that's a pregnant pause. And it's like, dang, that's, you know, why are you so quiet? Well, when you're quiet like that, it gives them a chance if they want to say something else, because their mind is thinking why you aren't saying anything. And so sometimes they start talking again and you get some jewels that you would have never gotten if you didn't give that pregnant pause. Don't forget that, y'all. Okay. All the rest of these are things you want to confirm what you're told by checking others to the extent that you can. You want to corroborate, okay, what you've been told. Very important in an interview. Is it supported? So you want triangulation. Is it supported by other things, other places that you check, right? So that interview, you might mean that you need to interview another and another and another and another in order to get a full story of what's going on. All right. Let's say that I decide not to do surveys, not to do interviews, but instead I'm going to do a focus group, okay? So a focus group is a small group discussion guided by a trained leader used to learn more about opinions on a designated topic and then guide further action, okay? So what's different from a group interview and a focus group? Some areas they sound the same, but for a focus group, generally it's being led by someone who's a trained leader in facilitation. It doesn't have to be the person who works directly with the client, okay? With the interviewee, that probably is that person. But with the focus group, sometimes the person who works directly with that person is not the best person to mediate that focus group. It can be done by somebody else, okay? And it's generally around the topic, not necessarily around that particular person, okay? So how are they different from regular groups? Focused on a specific topic. It's a trained facilitator who's leading the focus group, and members of the group are encouraged to talk openly about their opinions and to respond to other members. They're feeding off of each other, and you're pulling all this qualitative data in order to feed your assessment of what's going on. All right? When do we use a focus group? When we're introducing a new program or service. I pull everybody together. I want to get everybody's opinions and their thoughts. And this focus groups helps us to think of all the things that are there. Very important. What if you're working for an agency or your organization and you say, hey, we should start a new tutoring program? Okay, that's great. Let's have a focus group and let's include community members. Let's include some kids who are going to be a part of this tutoring group. Let's include some parents who are going to be a part of this tutoring group. Let's include some of the facilitators of this tutoring group. And let's have a focus group so we can ask them about what needs to be a part of a tutoring group that everyone will want to be a part of. Well, I'm going to tell you, doing that as a program developer is going to allow you to get a whole lot of data and a lot of ideas that you would have never thought about before. So you may have thought about, hey, I want to have tutoring where everybody comes together and they meet from 3 to 6 o'clock. And you might have parents who say, actually, that doesn't work. 3 o'clock doesn't work because blah, 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 blah. My kid is in sports and from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock, he or she is at practice, right? Where I actually need help is on Saturdays. Oh, dang, well, I thought that it was gonna be best to do this during the week. Oh, but no, Saturdays actually works best. Okay, so now you change your model to knowing that the tutoring needs to be on Saturdays, not when initially you thought it should be. Does that make sense? Okay, so you want to use focus groups often as a social worker in order to build innovative ideas. You want to use focus groups when the main concern is depth or sharing. It should be sharing. I'm sorry, you guys. Sharing of opinion, not shading of opinions. We don't want no shady people. Okay, sharing of opinion. And when you want to ask questions that can't easily be asked or answered in a written survey. Survey wouldn't do it. Focus group. Should always think that. Need to do this quickly, focus group, okay? What am I gonna do to conduct a focus group? Before the meeting, check my goals, consider other methods, find a good leader, find a recorder, decide who should be invited. How can I incentivize people to be involved? Free movie tickets, free bag of groceries. I'm trying to think of things that I've used before and that I use today. You know, $5, $10, you know, passes to an amusement park. I mean, I've done all kinds of stuff like that. And a lot of times places will donate to you when they know what you're doing. Get those donations and then incentivize people to come. They're going to walk out with this. Have food. That's always important with a focus group. You're going to call people together, provide food for them. In this day and area of COVID-19, you know, it matters on how many people you have in your focus group. Have a pizza delivered to their house for agreeing to participate in your focus group, okay? That'll feed them and everybody in their house. Get their address, have a pizza delivered. May cost you, you know, $8 to $10, okay? Based upon where you get that pizza from. Ask them what they like on their pizza, have it delivered. People will love that. They feel like you took care of them. It's a free meal for their family. Now I give you even more because you took care of me, okay? Prepare your questions, recruit your members, review the arrangements, all right? How to conduct a focus group, you guys. I gave all of this to you. You can thank people for coming, review the group's purpose and their goals, explain how it's gonna proceed. This just gives you general stuff for how to conduct a focus group. I'm not gonna go through all of this because I think you guys have the general gist of what I'm saying, from surveys to interviews to focus groups, but you can pause the slide and just kind of read through this. Look at the next one when you're conducting a focus group, what you do after the meeting meets, okay? How you put everything together for the group focus group. Once again, it's a good place to pause and just write it down. I've made it step by step, simple, easy to explain. All right, let's move into one of our last ones, conducting public forums. okay? Public forums, this is different from a focus group, are well-publicized public meetings. I gotta get the entire community together. This is immediate response. Stuff is going on, things are happening, and we need to take action. A public forum, that's gonna be your call to action, all right? Citizens discuss important issues. We facilitate the discussion. A transcript of the discussion is used for subsequent planning, all right? And public forums, we give people of diverse backgrounds a chance to express their views because everybody's invited. We get everybody there and everybody gets a chance to speak. You gotta have a good facilitation for this though. It's a first step towards understanding the community's needs and resources. Remember the difference of needs and resources, okay? They offer valuable insights into the community, okay? Provide a database for guiding and explaining actions. They help link your group with people who can help, and you can provide good feedback from the public forum. Coming out of this public forum, this is the data, qualitative data, okay? You tabulate it into themes, okay? And you present those thematic things that came out of the public forum back to everybody else. So what do we need to conduct a public forum? A place to meet, okay? Even if it's online, but a place where everybody can come together. Community members, of course. You need to have stuff where you can write down what people are saying, a facilitator, recorder, a willingness to listen very carefully and to observe what's going on, okay? Some questions that are worth asking: what are the problems and what are the consequences, all right? Who's affected and how are people affected, okay? Are there related concerns and are they widespread? Barriers, there's different people who might oppose the efforts. What are other limitations? How can we overcome those? All right, other questions worth asking are resources, alternative solutions. Once again, you can pause in order to get this information off of this slide. How do you organize it? You can use an easy to find, accessible public location, a library, a community center, a church, right? Always good places. Hold it in the evening or on the weekends when people can get there. Publicize it as wide as you can. Recruit diverse community members and engage them to be recruiters for you, to bring family members or friends or others that they know to come in. A lot of times you want to ask different people, hey, can you bring 5 people? Can you bring 5 people? Can you bring 5 people? That kind of thing. Provide transportation, always helps. Serving light refreshments, all right? Allow time for topics. Once again, you can pause here in order to see the slide, okay? Last thing I want to deal with here is community asset mapping, okay? This is our last method that we're using in order to pull together data on community development. All right, so what is an asset? What is a community asset? It could be a physical structure or place. It could be a business. It could be you. It could be everything living in the community. Remember, you have financial capital, you have social capital, you have human capital, okay? You have physical capital. So community assets can be broken down in many different ways. You're gonna see this in your community developer reading, but you wanna identify what type of asset is this, and identify that there are always multiple types. So a agency could be social capital, okay? A gang leader could be human capital, right? A bank or funding source might be financial capital. But being able to identify what types of community assets are there are very important, okay? When do we need to identify community assets? When you don't know what those assets are, when you find that talent is underutilized. Remember, this is very important in ABCD, okay? When you're unable to provide traditional resources or services, when you want to encourage pride amongst the residents for them to see everything of what's there, and when you want to strengthen or build relationships. Be careful of doing community asset mapping where you're only identifying organizations and you don't take into account human capital and social capital, which can be just as important or even more important in a marginalized community. So seeing that there's a lot of pride amongst families, that's social capital, okay? There's strong identification in cultural heritage in a community. Well, that's good social capital. And you need to map that, identify that. Where are people gathered around in that? Okay, that should be a part of your map. So a community asset map is exactly what it says. You are showing by a chart, a graph, a map, right? In language, where assets, be they human capital, physical capital, financial capital, where are they, what are they, and what they provide. Okay? Where are they? What are they? And what do they provide? A good community asset map identifies all that, and it makes people feel good because now they see everything that's there. They can know where to go, but also you can know where you need to broker relationships to pull things together to help the community tackle certain issues, right? So how big is the community? Who can do the work? How much time do you have? How much money do you have? What will you do with the results? All things you want to ask when putting together a community asset map, right? So you want to get out a pad and start writing what you already know, right? List what you already know. But then get out and start driving. Drive through, and you'll see that there's more there than what you may have noticed before. You may want to interview. You may want to do focus groups to find out more that can be identified in your community asset map, right? Once again, how do you walk through this? Answer the starting questions, decide on a geographic area that you want to do the mapping. How many people are you going to ask? What are some of the questions? All of that. Okay, you can see the slide. It's self-explanatory, right? You want to publish the assets that are there, and you might find when you publish it, other people say, oh, you forgot this, you forgot this. Okay, great. This was draft 1. Okay, we're going to go back and we're going to include what they've done, and now we got draft 2. And you make it a living document. Okay, you're continuing to build on it so people feel included. You create around this. Okay, you keep the records, establishing new assets. I've included a slide here so you can see how they've done this in Jamaica. So you can watch this by clicking on this YouTube and go ahead and walk into it, and you'll see of how others did in Jamaica on a community asset map. But I've already given you readings too on community asset mapping and a whole nother slide to watch on community asset mapping. And so I think all of that will inform what I've told you guys to do. All right, so an easy needs assessment is a SWOT analysis. The SWOT, all of you should have this in your vocabulary, and I should see you guys regularly utilizing this. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. A SWOT analysis guides you to identify the positives and negatives of your organization or even of an individual, and outside of it in the external environment. So this is an easy way to do a quick assessment. Excuse me, I needed to sneeze this whole time. All right, that can help you assess what's going on. So a SWOT analysis. Let's look at it real quick. You might use it to explore possibilities to problems. Whew, sneeze in there. Make decisions about what needs to be done, determine where change is possible, and adjust and refine your plans mid-course. So let's say something's already going on. A SWOT analysis can help you evaluate what's going on there. All right. This slide is going to help you a lot. Strengths. What are some things that the company or the individual does well? Qualities that separate you from competitors. Internal resources that are there. These are those assets that are there. Tangible assets such as intellectual property, capital, proprietary, technologies, all of that. Okay. So an exhaustive list of those strengths. Then in another category, what's an exhaustive list of weaknesses? Things that the company may lack. Things the competitors do that are better than you. Resource limitations, unclear, unique selling propositions. What are the opportunities? Underserved markets for specific products. Few competitors in your area. Emerging need for products or services. Press media coverage for your company, okay? And then what are those threats that are there? Others who are out there doing what you're doing, changing environment, negative press or coverage, okay, changing customer attitudes. But a SWOT is an easy way, whether it's at church, whether it's at your practicum, whether it's at an organization of yours, whether it's of your individual client, a SWOT analysis, even if you do it on yourself, okay? That's a good way to evaluate what's happening, okay, in community development. All right. So here's a question. What assessment would you use in response to COVID-19 in these following areas? This is an assignment that I'm giving to all of you, and I want you just to write up, no APA, just very simply, what assessment would you use? And I want you to submit this to me. Would you use in response to COVID-19? So there's a lack of hospitals within vulnerable neighborhoods. Okay, in order to assess that, would you use a survey or focus groups or community asset mapping or interviews? What would you do in order to address this lack of hospitals within vulnerable neighborhoods? With mass unemployment and the inability to pay mortgage or rent, what would be the best way to get qualitative data in that area? And then on to churches that feel slighted that they haven't been included as essential service providers. How would you get the voice of those churches to respond to what's needed? Would you use a survey? Would you use a focus group? Would you do observation? Okay, so of all the methods that I shared with you today, what would you use for all of these areas? I'm looking forward to your responses. You can easily write this up. These are 6 areas. What method would you use and why? What method would you use and why? Just the method, maybe 2 or 3 sentences on why, and then move to the next, okay? I want you to do all 6. I look forward to you guys' responses. It's been exciting sharing this time with you. I hope that you got a whole lot out of this presentation. It's been a long one, so hopefully you broke it up as we went through, but I think it's been good. I love all of you guys. I appreciate you. I pray that all is going well in your life. I look forward to seeing you in class through various mediums as we go forward. You guys have a blessed day.